Good morning, everyone. Let's try that one more time. I know it's early, but good morning, everyone. Good morning. All right, that's more like it. Very good. Thank you again for joining us today as we take time to celebrate and connect with the history and legacy of Rosenwald Schools in North Carolina. My name is Adrienne Nirdé, and I have the pleasure of serving as the director of the North Carolina African American Heritage Commission, which is a division within the North Carolina Department of Natural and Cultural Resources. We at the division work with a mission to preserve, protect, and promote North Carolina African American history, arts, and culture for all people. Our work is broad, and we work within the department and across the state, supporting and connecting folks just like you all who are doing all things African American history, art, and culture. And our work is realized in a very special way today. The vision for this gathering was dreamed up a number of years back by a number of colleagues within the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources. Several of you will remember the last regional gathering that took place in our state almost 10 years ago with the National Trust. We thought it was more than time to bring folks back together into one space. First, I want to thank and commend everyone here on the incredible work that you have been doing holding and stewarding the history of Rosenwald Schools in our state. As you know, this history is not old, and it happened within the lifetime of many of the folks in this room. But like many things, this history can be lost quickly and forgotten. I want to emphasize the importance of the work that you all do, and it is our pleasure as the Commission to support you all in this work. For those of you who heard me speak last night, we talked about the vision of Booker T. Washington and Julius Rosenwald, how their work sparked one of the largest mobilizations of Black education in America. This program was not only fundamental to the history of Black education, but a substantial part of North Carolina's history. Imagining and co-funding spaces with African American communities to support children, the Rosenwald program fostered learning and cultivated life in the Jim Crow South. And it is with great pride in that we continue to honor and recognize that history today. Like much of the work with the Commission, this convening came together as a collaboration. Thank you to our colleagues within the department, particularly Secretary Reid Wilson, who we'll hear from momentarily, our Deputy Secretary Stacy Meyer, Deputy Chief Secretary Stacy Meyer, Deputy Secretary Tracy Burns, Christy Norris, as well as thank you to our colleagues in the State Historic Preservation Office and the North Carolina Archives. Thank you also to all of our presenters that we are hearing from today. They have come from near and far to share their expertise, and I'm very excited to all of us to have the opportunity to learn from them. And last but not least, this event would not have happened without the work of several of my team members on the Commission, most particularly my Associate Director, Natalie Rodriguez, and Miranda Clinton and Kennedy Cox. Thank you so much for all of your work on this. It's really coming together as an incredible event. It is now. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Wonderful. And now it is my pleasure to introduce to you the Secretary of the North Carolina Department of Natural and Cultural Resources, Reid Wilson. He has spent more than 3 decades devoted to land conservation and environmental protection at both the state and national levels. Please join me in welcoming him.
Thank you, Adrienne. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. It is so great to see all of you. I bring you warm greetings from our Governor, Roy Cooper. Just a few words about our Department of Natural and Cultural Resources. We're a far-flung entity. We take care of things people love about our state, our rich history, our diverse arts and culture, our many spectacular natural areas. And it is literally from A to Z because we have art museums and we have the zoo and all these other wonderful places in between. I'll see if I can remember them all. We have state parks, aquariums, historic sites, archaeology, the State Symphony, the Arts Council, science museums, history museums, the library, the archives, the African American Heritage Commission, the American Indian Heritage Commission, Land and Water Stewardship, Historic Preservation, and more. And we have more than 100 sites in the state. And I think what's important about all of our places and the ideas they represent is that they bring people together. They create a shared identity of what it means to be a North Carolinian, and we provide common ground. And right now, I would say anytime we can create common ground for folks in this country and our current environment, that is an accomplishment. And everyone is welcome at our sites. We don't care who you are, what you look like, where you come from, doesn't matter. We want you to come visit us and interact with us online as well. So, gatherings like this one involving different parts of our department, the African American Heritage Commission, the Historic Preservation Office, the archives, the education folks, historic sites, conservation efforts. When we pull together all these groups together, that's sort of the perfect encapsulation of what we're trying to do to bring as much of our wonderful state to the people of North Carolina. And I'm just so excited there's so many people here at this Rosenwald Schools Conference. I also want to thank Deputy Secretary Tracy Burns, where are you? Oh, there you are, for your leadership. And thank you to Adrienne and your staff and the members of the commission. I'm constantly totally impressed by the African American Heritage Commission. They are small but mighty. They're not just doing this conference, also the Civil Rights Trail, Africa to Carolina, the Green Book, the African American Cultural Celebration. Each year they do a big toolkit for Black History Month, Freedom Roads, Rosenwald Schools, and more. They are engaged with so many communities all across the state, and they do an incredible job. So one of the really important things that we do at our department is we tell the story of North Carolina. And one of our top priorities is to make sure we tell a more inclusive, accurate, and representative set of stories about the people and the events that have shaped who we are as a state today. We love it when we can uncover a story that hasn't been told before, or something that was purposefully, put in the background so that people wouldn't know about it. We want to uncover those stories and tell them because we do have a complex history here. And we do that through our 8 history museums, 27 historic sites, the archives, the state library, Historic Preservation Office, archaeology, and even some of our state parks that have really important historical elements to their story. And I really do think that understanding our shared past, whether it's the good or the bad or the ugly, that's the way we can together help chart a path towards a brighter future for us and our children and our grandchildren. There's some people who think we shouldn't, tell everything about our history. We should not be scared of our history. We should just learn from it. We should emulate the wonderful, just, courageous things people have done. And we should absolutely avoid the horrible things people have done to other human beings in this state. I mean, to me, that's how we learn and grow and make ourselves a better society going forward. Now, as all of you know, but most people do not, North Carolina had more than 800 Rosenwald schools, the most of any state in the country. And these buildings were often the first schools for African Americans in southern communities. Yet so many people don't know this history. They don't know about these schools' significance. And many of the schools have disappeared over time or are in danger of disappearing from the landscape. So I moved to North Carolina a little over 20 years ago from the DC area. I had never heard of Rosenwald schools, that not in our school system up there when I was growing up. But fortunately, one of my colleagues at the Conservation Trust for North Carolina told me about Rosenwald schools. She's with us today. Margaret Newbold, please raise your hand over there, my good friend. So she persuaded me that the Conservation Trust should step beyond our usual land conservation mission to support efforts to renovate the Anderson Rosenwald School in Mars Hill. And I was like, well, Margaret, we do land. This is a building. She's like, think a little more broadly, Reid. This is about community. This is about the land that the building is on. This is about the connection between land and people. She's very persuasive. And so what we did is we contributed $5,000 to help fix the roof on the Anderson Rosenwald School. And that was, 15, 18 years ago. It was a long time ago. And what became obvious is that this helped local community people come together and raise other funds and do other work to bring that school back to life. So that was 15 years ago. Flash forward to April 7th, 2022. amazing, joyous celebration at the school. The renovation was complete. So community leaders, volunteers, the county school superintendent were all there. The building was beautifully preserved. It was just wonderful to step inside and feel what it was like to be a student there so many years ago. And it was even better to hear the county school superintendent describe how he was going to make sure that every single child in that county was going to spend quality time with their class in that school to understand the significance of that school, not only to the African American children who went there, but to the broader community, and so they would understand that history of where they're from. It was just wonderful to hear him talk about his vision for how every kid was going to go there and understand its importance. So historic preservation staff from our department were also there that day. No surprise. They had been involved in that project since 2010, I believe. And our State Historic Preservation Office has been working on Rosenwald School issues since the 1980s, and we've been a national leader in documenting and preserving Rosenwald schools in our state. I want to acknowledge Ramona Bartos, who you'll hear from in a minute, our Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer and also Division Director for the Division of Historical Resources, and she probably has a third title. But anyway, she and her team in the Historic Preservation Office, including Sarah Woodard, who I think is here somewhere, just thank you all for your involvement, not only in that school, but in so many others. So the Anderson School of Success story, that's the promise of everything you all are doing. And I know a lot of you have already had success stories like that, and I applaud you for that. And I know a lot of you are probably, working with your community and others to move your process along to celebrate your Rosenwald School. So whether you're reviving a building or fixing up the grounds, or if there's not a building anymore, educating your community about the importance of that school and the history of that school, it's all important because people need to understand how this Rosenwald School effort was able to educate African American children during Jim Crow where they weren't going to be educated otherwise. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for what you're doing in your communities to preserve this important element of our history and to remind people of our past. Future generations need to know the impact of Rosenwald schools in our state, but beyond our state, our nation as well. So I know all of you will learn a lot today, and you will connect with others who can work with you as you collaborate to, make progress on whatever you're trying to do with your Rosenwald School. I just wish you all the best of luck in fulfilling the dreams you have for your Rosenwald School, the one that you love, the one that you feel so passionately about. And if there's anything our department can do in the days, weeks, months, years going forward, I know you will not hesitate to reach out to us, and I'm happy about that. I want us to continue to be a partner with all of you so you can achieve the dreams you have for your Rosenwald schools. I wish I could stay. I have to duck out, but thank you all for being here. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate everything you're doing in your communities. It's so important that people understand this history. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Wilson. And now it is my pleasure to introduce to you our Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer, Ramona Bartos.
Good morning, everyone. It is so delightful to be with you this morning and to be seeing all these folks who we already know and to be able to meet new North Carolina constituents and neighbors who are interested in this work. And thank you, Adrienne, for the introduction. My name is Ramona Bartos, and the third title is Administrator of the State Historic Preservation Office. And I wanted to, by way of speaking to you this morning, to introduce our office. Many of you we have worked with you, we have gotten to know you, and that has enriched our lives. And I just wanted to introduce what our office is, and we are a service unit of our agency. There are 59 state historic preservation offices throughout the United States, one in each state and one in all of the territories. And we're very close with our neighbors in other states as well, many of whom in the Southeast at least have Rosenwald schools that they're also helping their constituents to steward. But I just wanted to really emphasize how valued you all are to us as our constituents, as our neighbors, as our fellow North Carolinians, because the places that we're all concerned with are centers of our shared memory. They are places that represent continuity in our communities. And you've heard about the Rosenwald work that we've done since the earliest days of our office, and I wanted to also point out we have several folks in the office, from the office here today, but also somebody who has come back as an annuitant, and that's Claudia Brown, who worked very closely with Claudia Stack. So that's the other Claudia that some of you may know about, and she's sitting over here. So I hope if you already know Claudia, you'll be able to speak to her. But we started working on architectural history surveys back in the early 1970s, but we started to recognize that we really had a survival of many, many Rosenwald schools in our state, probably the most of any state that had Rosenwald schools. And so we're really delighted that that work has culminated in another gathering today, and I just want to thank our colleagues at the African American Heritage Commission, especially Miranda Clinton, for their hard work in putting everything together today. But I also wanted to point out, we study, we try to identify, we have records, but we also want to have these places recognized through the National Register of Historic Places, and we have sought funding and want to do that again to get more Rosenwald schools on the National Register of Historic Places, which I think is a national and premature recognition of the importance of these places in our nation's history. And on a personal note, I just want to say, as my dad likes to say, I have a little bit more snow on the roof here. And I grew up in Georgia, and Georgia did things a little bit later than other states, unfortunately, in this regard. And I was one of the first in the generation of students who went to an integrated school. And many of my teachers, I have come to find, were alumni of Rosenwald schools in the part of Georgia that I grew up in. And I can tell you, it probably come to know as no surprise, they were amongst my most rigorous teachers who demanded excellence, and I think helped shape me in a very positive way. And so I guess in some way I am a legacy of a Rosenwald school through a different path, but all to the same, I benefited from those schools as well. So I just wanted to share that with you, and again, welcome you this morning to Raleigh. Some of you have come from a little farther away, and we're glad that you traveled to visit with us, and we are able to visit with you. So I hope you will seek out our staff today. We have both folks who are doing recognition work, but also to help with advice on how to steward the buildings, and that's part of our Restoration Services branch. So as you see folks today, don't be shy. We certainly want to get to know you better and to continue to work with those we already know and to work with some new neighbors as well. So thank you all. I'm really glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ramona. It is now my pleasure to introduce to you the Chair of the North Carolina African American Heritage Commission, Dr. Valerie Ann Johnson.
Again, good morning and welcome. I'll be toggling between my glasses because Ramona said a little snow on the roof. These little glasses are a little addition for me. I'm bringing remarks on behalf of the commissioners of the African American Heritage Commission. The commission has been impaneled by our state legislature to exist, and we are appointed. We are part of the boards and commissions appointing process, and the appointments to the commission come from both the legislative body and the governor's office. And so we serve from various parts of North Carolina, from the mountains to the coast, really. And I would say that all of the commissioners probably have a Rosenwald school within their purview, within their area. And so this is particularly important to us to be able to recognize what exists, how y'all are preserving that story, that history, that narrative. What I'd like to also do for just a couple of minutes is think about the context in which the Rosenwald schools exist and have existed. why they were created. You'll hear more and more about that during the course of the day, but I also want to emphasize the ongoing impact that the Rosenwald schools have provided in terms of education. And it's not just citing the schools in their various communities, but that they have given pathways to other folks to do their own kind of school. And so sometimes you'll see a property, and I can remember going to Franklinton Center at Bricks in Whitakers, North Carolina, and on the property they have a building that looks like it could be a Rosenwald, but when you talk about the history, it isn't directly a Rosenwald school, but they were influenced by the building of Rosenwald schools in their area. They're in Edgecombe County, and every time I look at that and I think about the meaning of education and how that had been and continues to be an enduring aspect of Black culture, Black uplift, Black intellect, that these little one-room, two-room schoolhouses were the fodder. They were the foundation for what you see today, all the way up to folks who are able to run for president of the United States. And I emphasize that because I look at our historically Black colleges and universities. Their existence is also predicated on the existence of these Rosenwald institutions. That, as Ramona was saying, you didn't know whether or not someone was an alumni until you start kind of really talking to them and finding out. And so one of the things that is important for us to remember, and I'm an anthropologist, so ask the questions of the elders. And make sure you get the story, because my mother told me a story about her first posting when she finished from Spelman College in 1951. She was posted to Milledgeville, Georgia. And she described this experience that she had. There were 4 teachers. They had this one-room schoolhouse. She talked about the wood-burning stove, and as a city girl from Atlanta, she did not know what she was doing and had to be really elevated by the community, because that's the other big component of Rosenwald schools, is community. Yes, there was leadership from other folks, philanthropists, Booker T. Washington, but it was the community that gathered themselves together to say, we're going to educate our children, we are sowing into the future. I look at educators as optimists, because when you walk in that classroom and you teach those little people from K to 12, you are, in fact, saying, I believe that there's a future with this young person. I believe that they're going to do something. And that is no small thing. And it just dawned on me sitting here that that's the optimism that I see within a Rosenwald school. And a final thing I'd like to say, in terms of community efforts, I had the pleasure and opportunity, and Betty Murchison was there when we went down to the celebration at Holtz Chapel Community Center in Oriental, North Carolina. And they were celebrating their Rosenwald School and the historic preservation dollars that went into it. And I want to lift up Preservation North Carolina. Benjamin Briggs, who's the current president, raise your hand higher. That these preservation efforts are state, they are private, they are nonprofit entities that are bringing and helping us remember, recollect, and celebrate education in North Carolina that goes beyond the confines of our particular geography. And so, the Mary Covington Stedman, okay, got it right, Foundation provides resources to help renovate, rehabilitate the property, the building, but it is up to you all to rehabilitate the memory and the recollection and the story of the Rosenwald schools. So I thank you on behalf also of my folks up in Granville County and the schools that we don't have right now that, people engage in very strong preservation efforts. So I just encourage you to continue and don't give up, because these stories are really, really important. And I thank you for this time.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. It is now my pleasure and honor to introduce to you our keynote speaker for today, Dr. Dudley E. Flood. Dr. Flood was born and reared in Winton, North Carolina. Since 1970, Dr. Flood has been a resident of Raleigh, North Carolina. He began his career as a teacher of math, science, and English at the 8th grade level, later teaching high school social studies and coaching high school basketball and football. He also served as a principal for 3 years at a school covering grades 1 through 12 before joining the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction as a specialist in school desegregation and race relations. During his 21 years of service with the Department of Public Instruction, he earned promotions first to assistant and then associate state superintendent. After retiring from the Department of Public Instruction, he served for 5 years as just over 5 years as the executive director of the North Carolina Association of School Administrators. Since April 1996, he has been a lecturer and consultant to groups throughout the country and abroad. Dr. Flood has spoken in all 100 of North Carolina's counties. He has also spoken or conducted workshops in 48 of the 50 United States, in addition to Bermuda, the District of Columbia, Canada, and Germany. His writings have been published in more than 25 journals, and he has authored 3 books. For 55 years, he was married to the late Barbara Thomas Flood, whose inspiration he credits with any success he has experienced. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Flood.
You've noticed all the people have abandoned me up here. I don't know what that suggests. Thank you, however, for first of allowing me to be here and to revisit most of you, or many of you, because we bumped into each other somewhere along the way. And was it 10 years ago we were together? And so thank you for that. And thank you for the amazing introduction. I normally don't expect to be introduced because I know everybody, but you reminded me, if you'd allow one personal reference some while ago, I was being introduced at a Mormon convention, and of course they had called me on the phone and they didn't know it was an African American they were getting. So the gentleman went right on and on and on with his introduction. Well, I don't ever sit on the platform. I always sit out there until I have to come to the platform. So the lady sitting 2 seats down from me said, any minute now they're going to tell me he was born in a log cabin. Well, when I got up, I couldn't pass that opportunity up. I said, ma'am, I was not born in a log cabin. I was born in a manger. Now, if any of you believe that, then verily, verily, I say unto you, the fact is, I want to share maybe 3 things with you about Rosenwald School. I attended Rosenwald School. I taught in a Rosenwald School, and I was principal of a Rosenwald School. Of course, the nomenclature had disappeared by the time any of that happened to me. We just heard the name. Didn't even know his first name was Julius. Certainly didn't know he was a gentleman who had been vice president of the most significant to African-American companies in America, because Sears and Roebuck is what it was then. Every black person I know had a Sears and Roebuck catalog in their house, and every item in there had 3 dimensions: good, better, and best. You're too young to remember that. I wish I'd kept one, but I'll tell you why I didn't keep one. I remember my dad called Sears and Roebuck one time and said to him, I need you to send me a carton of toilet tissue. And the man said, Mr. Flood, we need to know the catalog number. And my dad said, if I had the catalog, I wouldn't need the toilet tissue. So I go back with Sears and Roebuck a long way. But the fact of the matter is, what I want to talk to you in the few minutes we have together is about the culture. all the Rosenwald schools were different. There were 7 Rosenwald schools in Hertford County, is the county in which Winton sits, and I attended one of them. I taught at one of them. But the culture was what was in commonality, because there was a uniform culture, and there could have been exceptions. But the ones that I know, and I've been in a great lot of them, the similarities in the culture were this. First of all, you recall that Booker T. Washington was the person who invited Mr. Rosenwald into the situation. Well, Booker T. Washington was president of Tuskegee Institute. And Tuskegee Institute, Booker T. Washington's theme was, when you finish high school, you ought to be able to do something. Now, that didn't demean the academic equivalent, but it meant that you ought to go out and get a job. If you were living then, you would understand, and that typical African American, as somebody characterized recently, you had black jobs, and I know exactly what they're talking about, because my daddy had a black job. My daddy worked on a riverboat on the Shoreline River. And were it not for education then, that's where I would be now, working on a tugboat on Shoreline River. But thanks to education, I hope I've been able to make a greater contribution than working on a tugboat. I hope I have. I can't vouch for that. So I want to thank the concept of public education, but to thank the concept of the Rosenwald School, because in the one-room school which I attended, it's now C.S. Brown High School, because the names get changed over time. You know, it started at, when I went there, it was not C.S. Brown School, it was Waters Training School. And most of you who know anything about Rosenwald School, almost many of them were 1 through 12, and they were training schools. That was the Booker T. Washington influence, train you to do something. Well, if you'll keep this secret in the room, the first house that I owned, I built it. My wife and I built it. Now, we didn't put the framework, and we didn't do the plumbing and wiring, because they won't approve that unless you have a certificate. Everything got nailed in it, the root inside the house, we dressed it up. Where did I learn that? At C.S. Brown Training School. Because when we left there, everybody in that school took 2 things. You took a course in home economics, and you took a course in vocational agriculture, we called it. But in that you learn bricklaying, you learn carpentry, you learn cabinet making. So I left there knowing and thinking, by the way, whatever comes up, it won't matter what it is, because I can do it. Now, nobody slapped me on the back and said, you can do anything, but I left there knowing there was never going to be an instance in this world that I encountered that I wouldn't be able to deal with. Other thing they taught in each of these schools was public speaking. You didn't have to want it. If you were in the vocational ed, they taught it there. If you were in the home economics, they taught it there. Now, why did they teach public speaking? They didn't think you'd go out and be a speaker, not did I. But what they knew was that in the African American culture, if you were inarticulate, you were thought to be inept. That has not changed, my friends. That has not changed. If you are inarticulate, you are thought to be inept. You may have IQ of 200, but if you cannot express yourself well, you're not going to be perceived as intellectual. And so we taught our children how to express them. We didn't think all of them would be on the stump speech. But I will tell you that it gave them an avenue through which they would see themselves differently. And we didn't teach them. Now, I'm trilingual. I know English, I know cussing, and I know slang, but I also know dialect. But they taught us when to use what. So I know not to use those others in an intellectual group like you. I'll use a polysyllabic word every once in a while in talking to you. But when I'm talking to the boys on the river, monosyllabic words, 1 syllable. And I'll give you one personal story. The boys on the river, when I was coming up, most of them had less than a 5th grade education. These were the guys who worked in the camps on the river. And they would then have me to go to the store and buy comic books for them. And then I would have to come down to the river and I would read the comic books to them. And of course, comic books back then were 10 cents a piece. Yeah, I know they're $2.25 now, but it was 10 cents a piece. But they'd give me an extra 10 cents for going and get them. And then after I had read them, they were my comic books. So I'd go ahead and sell them again for 5 cents a piece. So, what I'm telling you is we learn economic proficiency. I don't know a homeless person who ever lived in my community, because in that community, in that culture, we would take you in. There was somebody at my house all the time, but Daddy said, "That's your cousin." I looked up the fire, he ain't no kin to us. But Daddy said, "That's your cousin." So I called him Cousin John, cousin whatever. What we learned in that setting was that you're not so significant unless you give. You're put on earth to give. Now, if you happen to get some reward for it, but most of us thought you're going to get that after you die. And I kept telling people around me, when you go to heaven, you're going to have 3 surprises. You're still going to have 3 surprises. The first surprise is you got there. That's surprise number 1. Because you know how you are. You know what you've been doing. And you go, "Phew, I made it." And the second surprise is you're going to look around and see some, how'd you get here? Because you know how you. And the third surprise, you're going to be looking for somebody. Where are they? I know good and well they'd be here. They ain't going to be there. Well, same thing is true in life. You cannot predict right now what any child is going to turn out to be. I absolutely know that nobody who taught me at Sears Brown School thought I would ever be the Associate State Superintendent of Public Instruction. I know that. Now, that's not to be discourteous to them, but that isn't what they perceived me as beginning. But they taught me as though I might be that. Why did they think I wouldn't be that? Because nobody black had ever seen anybody named Associate State Superintendent. I hadn't even seen them, including my principal. He would not have known the state superintendent if he'd walked into his office. See, I graduated in 1954 from North Carolina Central, the historical North Carolina Central University. Thank you. I know all of you couldn't be Eagles. I know that. Those of you, some of you had to go to NT, and some of you, I understand. Not a problem, brother. But the whole issue was, even though there were people surrounding me who had had exposure that I'd never been able to enjoy because we didn't have access to it, I left knowing that whatever faces you, we prepared you to do it. And don't wait for somebody to do it for you. So those are the general tendencies that were characteristic of the Rosenwald schools. One of the things that I've grown from having had that experience, and some of these you develop afterward, but I want to leave you with 2 thoughts. I have never seen a child, I'm talking about regular children, who couldn't succeed if given the considerations that we learned about success. So I'll leave you with this thought. Children are not necessarily what you think they are. They're clearly not necessarily what they think they are, but they tend to become what they think you think they are. They tend to become that. It's an inculcation factor. Now, I didn't learn that in college. I learned it. I was a volunteer for the United States Marine Corps. I don't talk about that much because I'm not even a veteran, because they found I had a heart murmur, and they sent me on back home, because if I'd stayed there long enough, I got out with a DD, and they'd had to feed and clothe me the rest of my life. But so if you go ask me what was my MOS, I'm going to tell you it was TDY. Those of you who were in service, you know what that was. I played basketball. But here's what I learned. They would come into the ranks, and they would take some young people who criteria I don't know, and they would take them to a thing called OCS, Officers Candidate School, for 90 days. We called them 90-day wonders, you remember? Because we said, what in the world can you teach somebody in 90 days that makes them so significant? But when they came back, they were They were top-ranked people. Well, I got a chance to visit one of the 90 days, not in the military, but when I was a Boy Scout master. They had a thing at Camp Lejeune, and they were having Boy Scouts to come, and they said, there's no CS. I said, I won't see that OCS. Because I'd always been wondering, what is it, world, you can do in 90 days? I was a teacher at that time. Well, the first day I went and sat in the back of the room, and I didn't see anything different. And I said, they're doing the same stuff we did in Paris Island. They call it something different. They were sleeping in the woods. They call it bivouac. We call it what it was, sleeping in the woods. You know? They were eating something they had a name for. They called it sea ration. We called it what it was, and I can't tell you right in here. But y'all know what we called it, you know. So I said, what's going to make them different? But the second day, I began to realize there was a little different here. 3 things were different. First thing was, everybody there spoke to them as though they were speaking to imported people. When they walk in the room, they throw them a high ball. Yes, sir. When I walked in the room, all right, get in line, move it. As a cadet, I didn't get any of that. So I said, what must be going on in the Belfort Tower up here? Second thing I noticed, they responded to them as though whatever question they had asked was significant. They didn't do that to me in boot camp. Asked the question, that's the dumbest question I ever heard. Please, Jim, oh, sir, that's a great question. It gave them some information. The third thing I noticed is they behaved in their presence the way you act around imported people. These 3 things characterize from that day to this how I've lived my life. That is, I speak to children as though I thought they were significant, important. I respond to children, not just children, same to you, as though what you said mattered to me and made a significant difference. And I behave in their presence the way I act around imported people. I hope you all don't think I like this necktie. I put it on because I was going to be talking to imported people. And I want you to know that I respected you enough to prepare myself to do that. Let me tell you something, folks. If you teach that to all the children, you would be astonished at how quickly. Because what I found out in my classroom, in about 90 days, they became what they thought I thought they were. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and have a good conference.
Thank you, Dr. Flood. All right. Well, we've got a full schedule of events for you all today. I do want to encourage you, if you have not already, during breaks, we have a networking session later this morning. Please take the opportunity to meet with folks who are tabling in the room next door. We also have a beautiful exhibit that my staff worked on talking about the Rosenwald Fellowship Fund that I'd love for you to take a look at. There's also a gentleman with Longleaf Productions who's interested in doing free screenings at your locations of his latest Rosenwald documentary. So I want to make sure that you take advantage of that opportunity. In terms of our schedule today, we're kind of going to be hopscotching between rooms, so I do encourage you to take a look at the map in your program located on page 5. Our next panel session will be located in room 6, which if you make your way into the main space, it'll be down a hallway to your left, but we will have staff directing you throughout our time together. But I look forward to learning from you and hearing from you more today, and I'll see you in the next session. Thank you.